Do you remember the smell of a brand new toy shop? That mixture of fresh cardboard, new plastic, and a hint of sawdust from the wooden shelves. The excitement of pressing your nose to the window, knowing your birthday or Christmas might just bring you something magical inside. The 1970s were full of toys that sparked our imagination, and, if we're honest, sometimes made our parents a little nervous. Back then, rules were looser, warnings were smaller, and childhood felt bigger. Today, we're opening up that old toy box together and dusting off 10 British toys from the 1970s that simply wouldn't be allowed today. Some were dangerous, some just too wild, but all of them are stitched into our memories. Number 10. Original Scalextric Power Packs. For many children in the 1970s, a Scalextric set was the crown jewel of the Christmas list. The track clicked together on the living room floor, the cars lined up, and then came the moment of truth, plugging in those chunky power packs. They were heavy, unshielded, and warm to the touch after a few laps, humming softly as the current surged through the wires. With a quick squeeze of the trigger, the little cars shot off, their motors whirring, tires squealing around the bends. Push too hard, and they'd spin out, skidding across the carpet. Sometimes the metal contacts gave you a little shock if your fingers wandered, not enough to hurt, but enough to make you laugh. Modern versions are sleeker and safer, but those old power packs had a raw, mechanical charm. They made every race feel just a little more alive, a little more dangerous, and far more exciting. Number 9. Stilts. There was something magical about the moment you first found your balance on a pair of stilts. In the 1970s, they were often made of wood or metal poles with simple footrests halfway up, and they transformed you from an ordinary child into a towering giant. The first few tries were wobbly, arms flailing as you took cautious steps, but once you got the hang of it, you felt unstoppable. We'd parade around the garden or up the driveway, seeing who could stay up the longest or step over the tallest obstacle. Of course, the higher you were, the harder you fell. Scraped knees, grass stains, and the occasional bruised chin were all part of the experience. There were no helmets or knee pads, just grit and determination. Today's safer, shorter versions don't quite capture that thrilling mix of fear and freedom we felt teetering high above the ground. Number 8. Creepy Crawler's Maker. On a quiet afternoon, the Creepy Crawler's Maker could turn an ordinary kitchen table into a mad scientist's lab. The kit came with metal molds shaped like spiders, beetles, and worms, along with bottles of colorful Plastigoop liquid. You'd pour the goop into the mold, place it on a small electric hot plate, and wait as it bubbled and set. The smell, a strange, plasticky sweetness, filled the air, and you'd watch impatiently until the shapes were ready to peel out. Sometimes you'd burn your fingers in the rush to see the result, and occasionally the hot plate would scorch the table underneath. Health and safety would shudder today, but in the 70s, it was just another creative toy. Those wobbly, rubbery insects weren't just playthings, they were little trophies of patience and imagination, perfect for scaring siblings or decorating the edge of your desk. Number 7. BB Guns. For many 1970s kids, a BB gun felt like the ultimate step towards growing up. Usually spring-powered and made of sturdy metal, they fired small pellets with surprising force. Targets were often tin cans balanced on a fence, though the occasional garden gnome or unsuspecting apple on a tree met the same fate. We didn't wear goggles, and safety was little more than making sure your mate wasn't standing in the line of fire. The satisfying ping of a pellet hitting its mark was addictive, and a good afternoon's shooting could leave the garden littered with dented cans. Parents called it good aim practice, though they winced if a greenhouse pane went missing. Over time, new laws, stricter controls, and safer alternatives pushed them out of most toy shops. But for those who had one, the memory of that cool metal in your hand is impossible to forget. Number 6. Wood-burning kits. A rainy afternoon in the 1970s could be transformed by a wood-burning kit. Inside the box sat a small electric pen with a metal tip that grew hot enough to scorch patterns into thin pieces of wood. The smell of singed pine would fill the kitchen as you carefully traced your design, perhaps a sailing boat, a flower, or your name in big block letters. Concentration was intense. One slip and you'd leave an unplanned burn mark or a painful blister. Tables often bore the secret scars of an afternoon's work, hidden under a tablecloth until Dad found them. There were no guards, no safety gloves, just a steady hand and the thrill of creating something lasting. By today's standards, it was far too risky for children, but those warm, smoky hours spent leaning over the worktop felt like real craftsmanship, and the finished plaques were proudly hung on bedroom walls. Number 5. Space Hoppers. Few toys sum up 1970s Britain quite like the bright orange space hopper, with its goofy, wide-eyed grin staring back at you. Made from thick, bouncy rubber, it had 2 sturdy handles at the top and just enough spring to send you bouncing across the garden, or, if you were brave, down the pavement. The moment you sat down and gripped those handles, you felt unstoppable, until a stone or crack in the path sent you flying. Scraped knees and bruised elbows were just part of the deal. On warm summer evenings, whole streets seemed alive with bobbing orange shapes, laughter ringing out as friends raced to the end of the road. They weren't the safest or the smoothest ride, but they were pure joy. Even today, spotting one at a car boot sale can bring back the sound of rubber squeaking and the thrill of one more bounce. Number 4. Cap guns. In the 1970s, a cap gun was more than a toy, it was your ticket to an afternoon of adventure. Made of solid metal with a satisfying weight in your hand, they came with rolls of tiny paper caps or plastic rings loaded with gunpowder dots. You'd slot them in, pull the trigger, and pop. A sharp crack, a puff of smoke, and that unmistakable burnt smell drifting in the air. Games of cops and robbers or cowboys and Indians would spill out into the street, with kids ducking behind trees and garden walls, shouting dramatic lines they'd heard on TV. Back then, no one thought twice about their realistic look, it was just part of the fun. Over time, concerns about safety and imitation firearms saw them replaced with bright plastic versions. But nothing matches the thrill of that first pop on a crisp Saturday afternoon. Number 3. Chemistry sets. Opening a 1970s chemistry set felt like stepping into a secret laboratory. Inside the cardboard box sat real glass test tubes, a little spirit burner, metal tongs, and rows of tiny jars filled with mysterious powders and crystals. The instruction booklet promised exciting experiments, making invisible ink, growing crystals, or creating fizzing reactions that bubbled over the rim. Of course, half the fun was going off-script, mixing colors just to see what happened. The smell of sulfur or vinegar might drift through the kitchen, and more than one worktop ended up with a stubborn stain. Safety goggles? Hardly anyone owned a pair. It was science, excitement, and a touch of danger, all rolled into one. By the 1980s, rules changed, the chemicals were diluted, and the thrill faded. But for those who had one, the memory of lighting that first flame and watching a beaker bubble still feels like pure magic. Number 2. Clackers. If you grew up in the 1970s, you'll remember the sound before you saw them, a sharp crack, crack, crack echoing across the playground. Clackers were 2 solid acrylic balls, usually bright and see-through, joined by a sturdy string with a small handle in the middle. The aim was simple, get them swinging up and down so they collided with a loud, satisfying clack. Once you mastered it, you could build up incredible speed, the balls blurring in a circle. But those balls were heavy, and if you missed the rhythm, they'd smack your wrist hard enough to leave a bruise. Sometimes, the acrylic would shatter under the strain, sending shards flying, yet we kept playing. For us, the bruises were like badges of honor, proof of playground skill. Eventually, schools banned them for safety, but the memory of those bright, clicking orbs swinging in the sun is impossible to forget. Number 1. Lawn darts. It's a sunny Saturday in the mid-70s. The smell of sausages drifts from the barbecue, the lawn is neatly cut, and someone's marked out a target circle with chalk or rope. Out come the lawn darts, long, heavy, and tipped with sharp metal points. We'd stand well back, take aim, and send them soaring high into the summer sky, holding our breath until they landed with that satisfying thunk. It felt like a proper game of skill, something grown-ups might play, and we loved the challenge. Of course, there was always the unspoken risk of someone wandering too close or a dart going astray, but back then it was just part of the fun. A few accidents, and changing attitudes toward safety, eventually sent them to the banned list. But for those who played, the memory of a dart sinking into soft grass on a perfect afternoon has never faded. And there we have it, 10 toys from the 1970s that would raise more than a few eyebrows today. They may have been risky, a little rough around the edges, but they were also bursting with imagination and freedom. Each one carried the promise of an afternoon's adventure, the kind that left your heart racing and your knees a bit scuffed. Looking back, it's not just the toys we remember, it's the people we played with, the gardens and streets where we laughed, and the long, light evenings when time seemed endless. These were more than playthings, they were part of growing up in a Britain that feels both far away and right under our skin. Which of these did you have? Which do you wish could come back? Share your memories in the comments, and if you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, like, subscribe, and join us for the next journey.